Hi, this is James Cook of the University of Maine at Augusta. I'm an associate professor of sociology, and in the classes I teach, we use algebra. We make reference to variations on what you learned in high school, which is the most basic form of algebra there is, the equation for a line. And in the previous video in this series, I talked about why you would want to know that. You want to know that because y and x are variables. Y is some outcome you care about. X is something you know. And if you can measure something about the x's in your life, whether it's height or your gender, and you can measure that in terms of some number or your income, you can predict some kind of outcome. How long you live, how happy you are, how likely you are to stay married, whether you use one form of social media or another. Y can be any outcome that you care about, and X can be anything that you know. And the fundamental question in most sciences is, does what we know over here, the X, give us the ability to hop over that equal sign, that equation for a line, to the Y, the thing we really care about? So if you care about anything in life, if you care about outcomes for yourself or other people, you might want to know a little bit of algebra. But there's more to it than that. There's the question of, first of all, whether those X's get you to understanding some kind of Y, some outcome that you care about. And if you know that the X's do affect your Y, understanding how and in what direction. And for that, we need our friend M. So Y equals mx plus b. We'll leave the b out of it for a while, just to simplify it. Involves, not just Y's and X's, but that M. M is slope, you heard, which is true if you're graphing it. But it's really about the presence of effect and the direction of effect. And let me get a little bit more specific about that. So, if X is your height, let's just go with a simple example, right? And Y might be your kid's height. You might be interested in, we want to know what the future of our kids might be. If Y is our kids' income and X is our income, that's all of a sudden a question about, pardon my dogs, it's a question about whether your own experience affects your kids' experience. That's called the intergenerational transmission of poverty or wealth. So to know about that, we need to know about our M. And really, a huge amount of social science and natural science is all about what the value of that M is. Because if you think about mx, right? And then if y equals some version of mx, knowing how the M interacts with the X is essential. mx is involving an implicit multiplication. It really means M times X. And some very simple rules about mathematics that you were taught when you were a kid apply. So let's think about 0. Any number times 0 is 0. So what if M equals 0? It means that no matter what the number of that X is, it's not going to change Y. Why? Because let's say, let's go back to your own income and how that might affect your kids' income. If M equals 0, then what that means is it doesn't matter how high your income is, like $10,000 a year, or $100,000 a year, or $1 million a year. If what we find in the data, in what we observe out in the world, is that the relationship is really one where M equals 0, then no matter what your income is, because M equals 0, the effect on Y is going to be the same. Because M times X, if M is 0, is always going to equal 0. And then, by the way, that b, that will determine your kid's outcome entirely. It's just going to be some number on average with no effect of that variable. Another piece of information about m, which is crucial, is whether it's positive or negative. So think about if that m was negative, right? What do we know about any number times a negative number, right? It becomes negative. So that would mean that as your income goes up, oddly enough, if m, the effect of your income on your kid's income, if it's negative, that means as your income goes up, your kids' income in their lives will tend to go down. That would be a very strange world, right? As a matter of fact, what we discover is the opposite, which is that m tends to be a positive number. And so that means that your income, as it goes up, there's some number m that you can multiply it by when you go out and you look at lots of people's income and their kids' income. And as your income goes up, it's multiplied by some number m that we find when we estimate this equation for a line. And it means that your kid's income is likely to be higher too. The fact that we find that m is not zero, that your income does not have a zero effect on your kid's income, that is, that they're independent of one another. It doesn't matter what your income is. You know, your kid's income could be anything. Well, that's not true. It's not the case that m is a negative number, that as your income goes up, your kid's income will tend to go down. No, it's a positive number. And then we can begin, once we quantify that, right, we can begin to think about, well, why might that be the case? How does it work? How strong is that effect, right? And the strength of that effect has to do with how big m is. If m is like, 1, then that means that if I tend to earn $50,000 a year in my lifetime, and m is 1, it means my kids will tend to earn $50,000. If m is larger than 1 and positive, then what that means is that as I am able to increase my income, I know that it's going to have a multiplier effect, like maybe by 2. If m is 2, that means my kids will be likely to have twice as high an income as I have. If m is a positive number, but it's between 0 and 1, like half, then that means that on average, with a person who has an income of, say, $50,000, their kid is likely to have an income of, say, $25,000. If someone has an income of $100,000 a year, their kid is likely to have an income of $50,000 a year. Okay? So knowing not just that it's a positive number versus a 0 or a negative number, but how big that positive number might be, tells us actually a whole lot about how income, which determines so much, health, happiness, where you can live, what you can do, it tells us how much to worry about our own income and how that affects our kids. Now, don't tell me, if you're a parent, that you don't care about how your kids are going to do. We could ask similar questions like, if I'm in a neighborhood of people, and that neighborhood of people has, on average, a certain income, how is that going to affect my own income? Well, you can describe that. So the average income of a neighborhood is some X. My own income is some Y in the future. I don't know it yet because it's the future. But if we can look at how it's worked in the past, and we can figure out, first of all, whether m is positive versus 0 or negative, and then how big m is. If it's 1, which means there's a correspondence of 1 to 1, right? That whatever x is, that y is going to be the same. If I have a neighborhood in which people tend to make $50,000 a year, then I will tend to too. Well, that gives us knowledge. If m is 2, then that's great. That means you really want to live in a neighborhood, if you want a high income, of people who have a high income, because you'll end up doing even better. And that's what sociology is about. To no small degree, predicting what happens to people based on what's around them. The social context is a set of X's. and the outcome is a set of y's. So that's why we're going to talk about it. WHY, not the letter Y. And why in this class we're going to end up using a bit of algebra. We're going to talk about what x's are, we're going to talk about what y's are, and we're going to use data to estimate the m. So that's why the equation for a line matters. That's what we're going to work with. And in the third and final video, I'm going to actually sit down with the spreadsheet and I'm going to show you how that kind of relationship works.